Do you like the look of splatter but struggle to control it? In this video, I share an easy way to do it. Hello there, Michelle Short here with Terrific Tags with Michelle. Today I have two tags to share with you using the new fresh dye ink colours, as well as sharing how to control splatter. So let's get started. I'm using the Golden Days layering stamp set today. This is absolutely beautiful. I love the shape of the flower, and then there are leaves as well that you can add to it. So I'm using the Stampwheel today, and I'm adding a piece of classic Crest 110 solar white cardstock into the corner. And then I'm going to take the first layer of the Golden Days flower. This is the outline. And I'm just going to place it down onto my piece of cardstock here. And then I can pick it up with the Stampwheel clear flip plate. And I have an enamel dot at the bottom of my plate. I know some people like to have a few on their plates, like in each corner maybe. I actually just like to have one at the bottom, and I will show you a little bit later why I just like the one. So I'm stamping this layer, I'm inking it up with Obsidian Pigment Ink. This is a really beautiful dark crisp black ink. So I'm just inking up the stamp really well. And then I can stamp that down into the stamp wheel base. And my cardstock, although it's in the corner anyway, so if it does happen to move, I know that it's going to go back into that corner perfectly, but because it's on that sticky mat, it's not going to go anywhere anyway. I did restamp this. I actually didn't really need to, but I just ended up restamping it just to make sure that I got a really nice dark crisp impression. I am going to clean off my stamp just so that I don't end up getting ink anywhere I don't want it. I'm not cleaning it perfectly, but just enough so that, like I said, I don't get any ink anywhere. Because this is a pigment ink, I am going to heat set it. So I've popped that back into the stamp wheel base, and now I'm taking the next layer of this flower. So I'm just placing it on top. I do end up leaning right over to make sure that that's lined up properly, but I cut my head out of the video because I didn't think you wanted to see that. So next I'm going to rotate the plate so that I can add lots of these layers onto the one plate. So now my enamel dot is on the right hand side. I'm next going to bring in the Sweet Dreams Fresh Dye Ink bundle. And these are my absolute favourite colours. I absolutely love them. And for my first layer, I'm using Dewdrops. So I'm inking up that stamp really well. These inks have got a little bit higher viscosity to the ink, and so they work perfectly for stamp layering. So I've just inked up that stamp really well, and now because I've got that enamel dot on the right hand side and I know that that's where it's meant to be, I can stamp that down. And that's why I personally prefer just to have the one enamel dot, so that I know if it's going to be on the right hand side in this where I'm doing it now, then it's going to stamp perfectly fine. I wasn't 100% sure if I was going to re-ink the stamp and stamp it twice, but I did decide to do that, and I did that for all of the layers. These inks do take a little while to dry, so even when you first stamp them, you might not get a perfect impression, but as the ink dries, it does kind of dry out nicely, and so you don't usually get too many gaps. But like I said, I decided to re-stamp it. For those round ink pads, sometimes it's a little bit difficult to get the lid on. There are two notches on either side of the ink pad, like on the top of the ink pad lid and then on the bottom, and if you line those both up really nicely together, you can turn the ink pad and close it really nicely. So I've got my third layer here, and this time I've got the enamel dot at the top of the stamp wheel. This time I'm inking up the layer with Aqualicious ink, making sure that my enamel dot is on the top of the stamp wheel, and then I can stamp that down. And again, I'm just going to ink it up twice so that I get a really nice impression of that ink. I'm just cleaning off my stamp, and then I can move on to the last layer of the petals. So this time I'm going to make sure that my enamel dot is on the left hand side. And I'm going to ink up the stamp with Teal Cave ink. So just stamping that down, and again I'm going to double stamp it. So at this point I decided not to stamp the inside of the flowers. I want to stamp another flower in a different colour. So I'm going to leave all of my stamps in place on the flip plate, and then I can bring in another piece of cardstock. So now all of my stamps are in place. I don't need to worry about whether they are lining up properly or anything like that. All of that work has already been done for me. So in theory, I could then go ahead and stamp this multiple times. I am only just doing it an extra once, but you could do it loads and loads of times if you wanted to. This time I'm using the Red Sunset Fresh Dye Ink Bundle. For the first layer, I'm using blush. This is a really pretty kind of pale coral colour. Again, stamping it twice just to make sure that I get a really nice impression with that layer. I'm cleaning off the stamp again just to make sure that I don't get it stamped anywhere I don't want it. And then I can ink up the next layer with rouge. And although I've sped this video up quite a bit, this didn't take me much time at all. Once I'd got all of those layers already done, like I said, I could just stamp this so many times in loads of different colour combinations if I wanted to. For the next layer, I'm using crimson. So as long as I make sure that I know where that enamel dot is at all times, it's really easy to not have to think too much about where you're actually stamping. I decided in the end that I was going to not stamp the flower centres. I actually really liked it as is, so I'm not going to stamp those. But if I wanted to, I would just remove all of those stamps and then go through the same process that I did before for the flower centres. In my last video, I did black leaves and just had the flower itself like really bright and vibrant, and I thought I would do the same thing on these tags today. So I've just taken two of the layers, so of two different leaves, and I'm inking those up with Obsidian Pigment Ink. I am going to double stamp them again just so that I get a really nice dark impression. I decided to not pick the leaves that were the completely solid layer, but just one off of it, so there is still some white area. And because I'm making two tags today, I'm just going to flip over that panel of cardstock and then I can stamp them again. I could have just rotated the flip plate, but I found with the stamp wheel I do actually prefer to have my stamps stamping closer towards me. That's just personal preference. So just making sure that they're well inked up, and then I can stamp those down. And I did set those aside to dry. I'm then taking the coordinating dies and I'm placing those over the images, holding them down with some low tack tape, and then I can run those through my die cutting machine. I've then cut some tags from Classic Crest £110 Solar White cardstock using the Terrific Tags die set. I then wanted to add a little bit of interest onto these tags, and this is where the splatter comes in. I love the look of splatter, but I like to control it because I don't want too much splatter. I'm very much a clean and simple crafter, and so I don't want to splatter where I don't want it, basically. So I'm taking the stamps from the Inky Lily set, and these are splatter stamps, so everything is done for you. I don't need to worry it's not going to stamp in the right place, or I'm going to splatter it in the wrong place. So I'm just lining up where I think those splatter marks are going to end up. I can pick up the stamps with the flip plate, and then I'm just going to stamp those down with the same Obsidian Pigment Ink. That's so that all of the inks match really nicely, like all of the blacks are going to look the same tone of black. Most of the splatter is going to get covered up by the flower, but I like just having that added interest onto the tag. So let me know if you are a splatterer or not. Like I said, I do like it, the look of it, but I'm not always happy that I can't control it. I've then cut another 2 tags and I'm placing them on the back of these stamped ones, just using some glue tape to adhere them together. This is going to add some stability to the tag, but also make sure that it's nice and clean on the back of the tag as well. I've then added some instant dimension foam tape onto the back of the flowers, and then I'm just going to place those on the tags without adhering them down to start with. I'm then adding some glue tape onto the back of the leaves, and I'm just adding it more towards the tops of the leaves because I know that they're going to overhang slightly, and I want to make sure that I don't have any adhesive showing on the back of the tag. So I'm just popping those in place. I'm not actually pressing down at this point, just in case I want to rearrange anything. So just adding those top leaves there. And then I did decide to rearrange the one on the right. Once I'm happy with the placement, I'm just going to take a piece of scrap paper and press those leaves down onto the tags. I wasn't 100% sure if the ink had completely dry. It had dried, but I didn't want to get my fingerprints in it. So I'm just removing the backings off of that foam tape, and then I can press the flowers down onto the tag. And I really like using the tweezers just so that I can kind of hover things in place before I stick those down. I've then stamped a sentiment that reads "Just for You" from the bold sentiment stamp set. I've stamped those with Obsidian Pigment Ink again and cut them into strips, and I've added some foam tape onto the back of those, and then I can just place those down onto the tags. And then to finish off, I'm adding some twine through the top of the tags, securing it in place at the front, and then I can tie that in a bow. I really love how these tags turned out. I really like having just the black and white. It's quite nice, sort of bold. And then you've got the pop of colour on the flowers. So just fiddling around with that bow a little bit, and then I can cut those tails down. And that is the tags finished for today. Like I said, I really love just having the colour on the flower itself, and I really love how that splatter just kind of peeks out from the side of the flowers. Links to the products that I used will be listed in the description box on YouTube and also over on the Altenew blog. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.
Hey there, Lydia here. I really do hope that you've just enjoyed the video. If so, please subscribe to the Altenew YouTube channel. Also, turn on the notification bell so you can get your daily dose of crafty techniques and tutorials just like this. Thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye.